And welcome to Thrift Shop Biography. This is the one about Quincy Jones. Thank you for listening. Hello.
Hello.
Which book have you been reading this week?
This week, hopefully the same one as you. Yeah. Quincy Jones.
Quincy Jones.
Autobiography.
Yes.
What's it called? I can't think.
It's called Q.
It's called Q. Guess who gave him that name? Frank Sinatra.
Frank Sinatra.
Their first time they worked together, he said, "Thanks, Q. Good job." And then left. He goes, "Didn't see him again until 1964. I don't know why I remember this small sentence, but I loved it. Loved all the Frank Sinatra bits.
Were you a fan of Quincy Jones before reading this book?
I have to admit it. I am a massive fan of him.
Yeah, I knew that.
I'm thoroughly aware of him.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, I knew him as jazz and then found out he was the producer of all the Michael Jackson stuff and then got really interested in him, then listened to all of his own albums, his own music, Razzmatazz.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, I love him. Yeah, he's great. Yeah, how about you?
I'm just very aware of who he is, but I don't know. Is anybody ever really a fan of a record producer?
He's not just a record producer.
He's not, I know that now.
What I knew is that he worked with Michael and produced, and the sound, because if you listen to his own solo stuff, like I Know Corrida, that stuff, the sound, that's his own music that he's written.
So he's an artist.
Arranged everything. Then you hear Michael, you realise how much of his music is in Michael's albums. So then you realise he's more than just a producer. He's an arranger, a composer. You
could say that Thriller is a Quincy Jones album that Michael Jackson is singing on.
Yes. Sometimes Michael Jackson...
It's a collaboration,
It really is a collaboration. Yeah. Massively so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I totally understand that. I get that he's particularly gifted, Quincy, in not just production, but in arrangement and playing and writing. No, I get all that. But before I read the book, I didn't know anything about him.
No, so as a person, I agree, apart from the odd interviews I've heard and stuff. I didn't know the half of all of his arranging. Loads of his compositions and soundtracks, didn't know the half of that.
No, I had no idea.
Yeah, this has taken him into a whole new
I have
stratosphere.
to be honest, okay, before coming to this book, I knew I Know Corida and Razzmatazz, obviously, classic early 80s tunes.
Give me the night, boop, boop.
Yeah, and Thriller, of course.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that he worked on Bad.
Oh, didn't you?
No, I have to say, other than a couple of his own tunes and Thriller, I don't think I knew anything else that he did.
No.
And he's he's incredibly
amazing.
prolific, isn't he?
There's this woman he worked with in Paris, Nicole Boulanger. She worked with Stravinsky and they were really good friends, and Bernstein. And she turned down Gershwin and she accepted Quincy. He learned so much from her. And when asked who's the most influential musicians you've ever worked with, she said Stravinsky and Quincy Jones.
Wow.
That is amazing, isn't it? That's how up there he is.
That's a seal of approval.
Yeah, and I learned that through this book. I didn't realise he was considered one of the best ever in his job. Shall we start at the beginning?
Yeah, poor little Quincy and his little brother...
Lloyd! He was born in 1933, so you're right in Depression-era America. And black, and in the ghetto south side of Chicago. So we're right where
Michelle
Obama grew up. Get to know the south side of Chicago a bit. Their mother sounds very intelligent. She ran a whole building, massive apartment blocks and stuff, and was pretty together. And then basically had a breakdown, became a...
Very mental, for want of a better word.
And had to be institutionalised.
Yeah.
His dad couldn't really cope.
Because he sent them to live with their grandmother. He just went away to get the money so he could make a proper life for those boys. Yeah.
Even after that, he couldn't really cope. He'd just leave some coins on the table and go. It's not like he could put the dinner on the table for them.
He did leave them to their own devices.
He absolutely
all
left them
the
to
time,
be completely
even when they were children.
Feral. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So he couldn't cope, but he did put a roof over their head. He wasn't a parent, but they loved him and worshipped him for his entire life.
Yeah.
They were absolutely feral, though. In that year, when he was gone, he didn't tell them what he was doing and didn't tell them he'd come back.
Right.
They didn't know.
Yeah, they thought he'd gone.
Yeah, so an enormous amount of damage is done in that year.
And they live with their grandmother.
Yeah, in a shotgun house where they're just sleeping on the kitchen floor, terrified of everything, and eating rats. They're so poor they ate rats.
Yeah.
Grandma cooked them up.
I know, but she cooked them very nicely.
No, there's not a lot of meat on a rat.
That just means they have to catch more of them.
In that case, that's fine.
No, but they used to eat the rats. No, the grandmother used to cook the rats in the house, and she used to send them to go down by the river to catch more rats so they could have more meat.
It's free food, isn't it?
It's free food. Tastes like chicken by all accounts.
Did he say that?
No. I'm assuming it's meat, white meat. People eat rabbits.
Okay,
What's wrong
now
with
you
eating
say
rats?
riverbank, it sounds better. Well, rats are notoriously diseased because they hang around, they eat rubbish.
If you boil it
sewerage.
up, it kills disease, doesn't
Oh,
it?
now you're a cooking expert of rats.
It sounded so disgusting. I had to rationalise it. And he actually said that his grandmother made nice rat food.
Rationalise it.
Which made some ratatouille.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what? If you're living below the poverty line and there's some meat in your house, club a rat over the head and cook it up. As a vegetarian, I see very little difference between somebody eating a rat or a chicken.
Fair enough. In the urban world, they are very diseased and they're climbing all over rubbish.
I have to say that I think rats get a very bad press, and I don't appreciate you saying that rats are diseased.
But it's because of that. Because...
One plague 500 years ago, and now we all think the rats are diseased. They just get bad press.
Do they?
Yeah.
Fine. Moving on from the rats. He's still alive. How old is he? He's like 90.
He's 90.
Still alive, and he grew up on rats.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah. He eats fine now because he made a lot of money, and I guess it's just amazing to see where he came from.
Yeah.
And that's what he was eating to his fine dining rest of his life because he went up and up and up. Always the interesting thing in a biography.
Rags to riches.
Yes, because
rats to
riches.
So their dad takes them to see their mum in the institution.
It's a massive trauma for them because they barely remember their mum. So the first thing they see is their mum. I mean, it's like a horror film of a nightgown in a mad place with everyone yelling. Before they even see their mum, this woman comes straight towards both the kids with a tray in each hand that's got human shit in it. And she says, "You shall have no pie!" Putting these shit in their faces, and they are horrified.
Of course, it would be terrifying.
Yes. And then they see their mum in the corner, and she turns round and she just goes, "Ah!" really yelling, completely crazed. And then she squats down, shits in her own hand, lifts it up when her dad hurls himself across the room and knocks it all out of her hands, says no, and then they go, "Come on, boys, we've got to get out of here."
Yeah, it wasn't a good visit, was it?
That's extremely traumatic.
Yeah.
And those boys are sat in the back of the car. I love this.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what to say and they do not know how to handle it. And little brother Lloyd turns around to Quincy and just goes, "You shall have no pie!" And they both crack up laughing. And that's the only way they can deal with it.
I thought that was so sweet. That is kind of like really sad, but also really funny.
I know.
Bless them.
But also they never deal with any of it. They don't talk about it. It's particularly Quincy.
Well,
can't talk about it. He bottles it all up.
The mum becomes a bit of a horror figure in
Throughout
their minds,
their
and they're
lives.
just terrified of her turning up, which she does at certain
because
points.
she's yelled, "I'm going to come back and kill you all," or something, hasn't she?
And she often turns up unannounced because she's managed to break out of the institution.
And whenever she does, she's sort of running up the street screaming at them and stuff.
Or
And they actually
banging,
think she might kill them.
Yeah, or banging on the back door with her hands covered in blood because she's smashed the window at the institution.
Yeah.
So they don't see her very often, and when she does, she literally looks like something from a horror film.
Yeah.
Oh, those poor boys.
It's really traumatic.
Yeah,
for
it's
them.
horrible.
And
but it's traumatic for her.
And her.
She's like a really intelligent, hard-working woman who's just gone mental.
It's
Of course,
trapped
going
in her
mental
own hairs,
in the
yeah.
1930s, 1940s, where
God
you
knows
are
what they've
just
given
shut in
you.
the nut
Yeah,
house.
electrocuted, God knows what.
It's just really, really sad.
It is really sad. And Quincy Jones says of his childhood that he's often got this hole in him. And sometimes it's hunger, but he doesn't know the difference. Is it hunger or is it a hole in his soul?
Like grief for his mum.
Yeah, he's just got this constant feeling of a hole inside him.
Yeah. Yeah, and those little boys wouldn't have been looked. I mean, really, I know their dad had good intentions taking them for that visit, but really it was not a good idea.
He had no idea what he was going to find.
Yeah.
He does his best to protect them. He does his best, doesn't he?
Right.
And he sticks with them.
Yeah, no, I do believe that, but as we'll find out, he just never stops having children.
I know.
And it's just because he quite soon comes back.
Yeah.
When they're at their grandmother's, dad comes back, picks them up. Did they move across the country at this point for a job?
Well, he met his new wife
They move about quite a bit. I get confused.
They've moved.
They go to Seattle, and don't they arrive on the bus, and their dad's more or less right at the beginning says, "That's our house up there. I've got to go to work."
Yeah,
and the boys just go off to the house, and they're still really small at this point.
Oh my God, they're really little, 7 or 6 or 8 or something. They're wandering around this whole new complex with all these empty houses. They break in everywhere. They break into stores. They rob things. They're just feral.
They're robbing to eat, aren't they?
They are robbing to eat. And then as more people move in, because they were there first, they're kind of like the leaders of the gang. Yeah, it's a seriously feral childhood for them.
But then their dad does meet this woman called Elvira. That's here, right?
I feel like he met her in Kentucky before they came.
Okay, sorry.
And
but
then she moved into them.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, he might have already had the kids. I think the 3 kids moved up with them. Oh, she had some of her
kids
own.
of her own, yeah.
And then they had 2 more or 3 more together.
I know this is
it's
thing.
So many.
Confusing. Yeah,
because we don't get to know them, it's hard to remember.
But also, what's sad about it, because she had her own kids, her kids were top of the pecking order in the house. The refrigerator was her refrigerator. Those 2 little boys, Quincy and his brother, were not allowed to go in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
If there was food, her own kids got fed first.
Yeah.
If there was anything left for Quincy and Lloyd, then they could have some. But quite often they were living with this mother figure in the same house as her and her children, but they were quite often going out and finding their own food.
Yeah. Stupid cow.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, she was. She wasn't a pleasant woman. No, it's horrible. So it was one of those where they loved their dad, but they were better off out on the streets, actually, just making their own money.
And they were resourceful, and they were making money. They were finding little jobs and stuff to do. Yeah. And it does seem like, they made some friends there that lasted a long, long time.
Yeah.
Oh, we should say that this book is not just written by Quincy Jones. Every other chapter is by another person in his life.
Yeah, it's nice. It's an outsider's point of view. It's like their early childhood. Their neighbour Lucy says about how Quincy...
I loved that.
Yeah, because she had a piano and Quincy came round and just played the piano and she said he had an absolutely natural talent. Mm-hmm. That's the only time you hear of him playing music when he's really small.
Yeah.
He was around there all the time playing it. Mm-hmm. And she also said how violent their neighbourhood was. Mm-hmm. And everyone had switched knives. And once Quincy got his hand knifed right through onto a tree. I have to say as well, there's a point where when they used to go to the shopping mall, there was a cop that they knew, called something like 2 Barrel Pete or something like that. That every weekend they used to watch him shoot black boys, and they used to drop like sacks of potatoes, he said. Broad daylight.
God.
And then it moves on to something else. She's like, am I just reading that? I've read it. It's shocking. I can't believe that's their life. And then he also says once they walked to school and there was a man hanging from a telegraph pole with an axe through his neck.
Yes.
And they just walked past him on the way to school. When they got to school, they told the teacher, and she said, "Wash your hands and go to class." That's their growing up. It's dark.
It's amazing they survived, actually, and actually both of those kids worked hard to get out of it, and they ended up really making something of themselves. Yeah. The odds were really stacked against those 2.
I think I have to say, because even at the end of the book, when Lloyd's talking about his life, he says that he'd have done nothing if it wasn't for Quincy.
Yeah.
He'd have gone nowhere. Mm-hmm. It's Quincy who's the real... It's something,
genius.
There's a spark in him. Yeah.
No, he does. Like, we're finding out in a lot of these books, like a lot of these people who are insanely brilliant and prolific and successful, there's something almost like they are
very
born
special
with it.
about them. Yeah.
And that in itself is the one thing that lifts them out of terrible conditions. Yeah. It doesn't happen to everyone, obviously, or everyone would be massively famous, but occasionally a little kid is born into these little dark pockets of life. Yeah. And they just have this insane talent, which seems to be given by God, because we don't know how else to explain it. And it does. It lifts them out of it. Yeah.
And then what happens is they're in this brand new estate area. They climb over and break into some sort of youth club sort of
like a social hangout
hall or something.
There's a piano in there,
they only break in there for the food, and then he finds the piano. So they're raiding the kitchens, and he's like, oh my God, gets to the piano, starts playing, and he says he feels the hole in his soul filling. He literally there and then feels that he's being pieced together and he finds an inner peace. That's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing, but it's also amazing that a kid who hasn't been formally taught piano, doesn't really have access to a piano,
hasn't had much music in their lives at all,
drawn to a piano and sits down and plays it.
Yeah, it just comes from within him. It is strange. From that point on, he goes to school and signs up to all the music classes, joins the marching band, finds out he can borrow instruments and takes them home. From that moment on, I am going to take everything I can about music and absorb it and sponge it all up. It's pretty amazing. But he absolutely dives into it. And he starts babysitting for his music teacher. And when the music teacher's out and he's supposed to be looking after the kids, he's ransacking his composition books and score books, finding out how to write and how to write music. And so this juke joint comes into it in downtown Seattle that's absolutely hopping.
Yeah. Is this where he climbs up and looks in the window?
Yeah.
And is just knocked by the wave of energy and enthusiasm. All black musicians, right?
Yeah. Smooth Criminal comes to my mind, and the little boy looking in.
Ah, yeah.
That's how I picture it, up an alleyway with a little ladder. It's all this amazing jazz. Like, this Seattle, it's famous for grunge, Nirvana and Pearl Jam, but I didn't know. Ray Charles lived there and Count Basie's orchestra was there for a long time. I didn't know all this other stuff was going on there in the 40s. Eventually, of course, his dad catches him up this ladder. Why does his dad catch him? Because he's going to the juke joint himself, the hypocrite. All right, 1947. He's 13 and the Count Basie Orchestra come to the juke joint. Legends. Their trumpet player, Clark Terry, he begs him to teach him trumpet. He's like, who is this little kid? He gets a chapter, doesn't he? In the book. This little kid came. He was such a pest. What time you go? He was like, well, I haven't got any time because I have to go to school at 8. But can I come round at 5 in the morning? So he did. And he says, why I let him, I don't know, because I'd only get in about 4 in the morning, have an hour's sleep, and he'd come round at 5. 5 till 8, he'd give him trumpet lessons every day whilst they were in town. It's amazing he did that.
Yeah.
There must have been something about him to other people. This kid's going to be someone. This is worth it.
Yeah.
And then 12 years later or something, that trumpet player left another legend, Duke Ellington's orchestra, to join Quincy Jones's.
Yeah, so he was
years.
right. So there you go. He did the right thing by teaching him how to play the trumpet because it got him a job later in life.
Well, that was the power of Quincy Jones. He'd actually become a better orchestra to join than Duke Ellington.
Wow. In 12
years from being 13.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Yeah. When Quincy is 14, he meets Ray Charles when he's 16.
Yeah.
Ray Charles has popped up in a couple of these books now.
Yeah.
And Quincy Jones starts a Ray Charles thing by saying it's as if nobody told Ray Charles he was blind.
Yeah.
Because he's just doing everything that everybody else does. Yeah. So I have to ask again.
Yeah.
Is Ray Charles actually blind?
Yes. Now, I have some years ago read his autobiography. I learned from his story how much his mum said to him. She knew she wasn't going to live long, or done. She must have been ill. And he had no dad. And she said to him, no son of mine will ever beg on the street. She absolutely taught him. She would never treat him like he was blind. He knew where everything was. She taught him to cook. She just taught him to see in other ways. Like, he sees with his ears. He sees with his mind. He sees with his nose. He drove. He rode bikes.
It blows my mind.
It's incredible. He's a phenomenal man.
Quincy Jones said that when you're with Ray Charles, it was as if he wasn't blind until a woman came along, and then he would pretend to be
banging into everything so that they'd help him. Incredible man, though, because he'd been in Florida before, like when he was 14 or less. He said, someone, find to me the place that's the furthest away from Florida on this map of America. And they said Seattle. So he got on a bus on his own and went there. And when he was 16 in Seattle, he had his own apartment, his own girlfriend, his own suits.
3 suits.
3 suits. Quincy Jones couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
2 years older than him, and he had all this stuff, and independent.
An amazing musician.
Seriously talented. Yeah, they are nerdishly obsessed with arranging and stuff. He's like, Ray Charles goes, oh, what's this knocking my door at 5 in the morning? Oh, it's Quincy. What do you want? Oh, I've just been thinking about these 8-note arrangements. How do you do that with a trumpet? Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, let me play this chord of this. And that's the sort of guy Quincy was. They are absolute geniuses. They don't just play. Their whole mind is like real deep knowledge of music, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of all the intricacies of it. It's incredible. Bumps Blackwell is a man who started a jazz band and gave Ray and Quincy jobs in it. And it sounds like a lot of fun. Like they played jazz, but they also did sketches and entertained people. And
they were the all-coloured Harlem Review band, so that's the way they marketed themselves back in the 1940s,
in Seattle.
of course, because, yeah.
None of them are from Harlem.
Yeah, right. So they're touring and being part of a fun band and that, aren't they?
Yeah, and learning actual showbiz entertainment, not just music.
And I know we're talking about Quincy and Ray, but this whole band is fantastic musicians.
Yeah.
They played for Billie Holiday.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just like, can you just get your band together to back Billie Holiday?
Did she come with her pianist, but they needed a band? And they said that she was so... I hated reading this. I mean, we all know it. She was so off her face or stoned that she had to be kicked on stage. Yeah,
she was stood in the wings and just couldn't come on.
And then when she walks onto stage... She walks straight past the microphone and then somebody has to send her back the other way to find the microphone again. I mean, sings beautifully,
it's heroin,
course,
isn't
but
it?
Yeah, but Quincy saw that at like the age of 15 and thought, I am not going down that road, which is amazing because a lot of the musicians he ends up touring with, they're all off their heads.
Yeah.
But Quincy seems to pretty much...
He does, actually. He's really got his head screwed on. He's on the tour bus saying, at the front you've got the God Squad, and then you've got the spliffheads, then you've got the drinkers, and then you've got the heroin, and then everyone sticks to their little club.
So he's gigging around Seattle and stuff, and then Lionel Hampton, Hamp...
Who is huge in those days.
Comes to town. Yeah. And Quincy is also, he's still at school, right? Taking music lessons, but he's writing music. Anytime he can get to a piano, he'll do a little bit here and a little bit there, and he's scribbling it all down. And then by the time Lionel Hampton comes to town...
Yeah, but Lionel Hampton's come to see him play. And then after the gig, he gives him the composition. And he looks over it, and asks him a few questions. And then he says, you really want to join my band, don't you? Yes. All right, you've got the job.
Wow, that's his ticket out of there.
Come on, be on the bus tomorrow, whatever time.
Yeah. And so he's so excited. He can't believe it. This is his ticket out of town. Joining Lionel Hampton on tour. And the next morning, the bus is there and he runs and he gets on the bus.
He hadn't even told anybody. He's so desperate to leave that horrible cow at home and all those kids. And he hasn't even told a soul just in case it doesn't happen.
And he's sat on the back seat in the coach.
Yeah, he doesn't want to say anything in case anybody... kicks him off, so he sits there quietly.
And then Lionel Hampton's wife walks up and down the coach saying hi to everyone, and then she spots Quincy and thinks perhaps he's a bit too young.
Yeah.
And she tells Lionel Hampton they're not taking him on tour.
He's like, how old are you? 15. He's too young. You need to finish school. Come back when you finish school. Get off the bus.
He says that the walk back down the aisle of the bus was the longest walk he ever had to take.
He's so close to his dream.
I know.
But, I mean, she did the right thing because he did finish school.
Yeah.
And he did become an absolute legend who was learned. And maybe couldn't have handled that tour at 15. Mm-hmm. You know, she did the right thing, but, it's crushing to read because it's so exciting. He's going to get out.
Yeah.
No, he's not. He was so close.
Hey, here's a thought. If he did... go on that bus and didn't go back to school, he would never have met his wife.
Yeah, not that makes a huge amount of difference. He would have always been who he was, wouldn't he? Yeah, he did end up marrying his school
Jerry
sweetheart,
pretty white girl.
Yeah.
And she said that she was in a sorority, and she said the mothers of the other girls wanted to get rid of her because she was seeing a young black boy.
Yeah.
The principal of the school got her into the office and told her she was ruining her life getting together with a black boy. And you know what? That school ended up naming their auditorium after Quincy Jones. Isn't that?
Yeah. So this is about the end of the 40s. Racial segregation in schools only happened in 1954. That's the time they were in. You're deep in racial divided America, aren't you? So that's pretty radical because they moved to New York together. Lived together, had a child by the late 40s, early 50s. That's pretty radical.
Yeah, for sure.
She's stunning. She looks like a film star.
She's stunning and he's super
He's stunning.
handsome.
They're both stunning.
No wonder they were drawn to each other.
And charismatic and both pretty cool people.
Yeah, for sure. Didn't stop him cheating on her 100 times over. Why are men like that?
Well, he does sort of say, firstly, he has this hole in his soul that could never be filled and he knows he misbehaved. But also because he had the opportunity. He just had so much opportunity.
It's the trouble with these famous people. There is just lots of opportunity.
It's not just famous people. It's just if you're in the right place, because he wasn't famous at this point at all. He was hanging around Birdland trying to get jobs. He was trying. Let's see how he got there. He was 18, and they got a scholarship to music school in Boston, and he went for a bit. But as soon as he was there, he was like, it wasn't the sort of music he wanted to do, and he got the opportunity to go to New York City. He had $30 in his pocket. I think he got paid to do an arrangement. And he couldn't believe it because he met all of his heroes. He went to Birdland, including Charlie Parker. He was like, I cannot believe I'm at a bar and talking to Charlie Parker. And he was so shy and so quiet. And then Charlie Parker said, do you want to come uptown with us in a cab? And he's like, yeah. And they go into like a really dodgy district. Everyone's out getting out of the car and they all go into this building. And he says, hey, how much money you got in your pocket? He says, $17. It's all he's got. So give us that. I'll be back in a bit. And he never sees him again.
Yeah.
He waits for about an hour and finally realises he's not coming back. Sort of works out what's happened. I imagine it's heroin, so they're shooting up. They're not coming out for 2 days, are they? And he says, I wiped a tear from my face. It started to rain and I set off walking.
Yeah,
and that was the end of that chapter. I was like, oh my God, if I didn't know he turned into Quincy Jones, I'd be gutted. But what a hard lesson to learn.
New York City.
Yeah.
He's gigging prolifically, working with every named artist we've ever heard of.
It's the who's who of everybody.
Yeah.
Within jazz circles, and that's never paid well. But
and they're touring as well, right?
Yeah, he gets a big band together and goes on a world tour and European tour.
I think this is also what sets him apart. He's not content. Well, I don't know if it's because he's not content, but he's not just part of the band. He very much becomes the booker, the promoter, the producer. He's putting his own money up to, if they can't get gigs somewhere, he'll think, well, where are we near?
Yeah, okay, from the theatre, can I get them in so we can get the money? It's very hand to mouth, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And he also then will take a punt. If they don't have anywhere to gig, he'll fly them all to the next country in the hope that they get a gig. They often do.
Yeah, that particular tour was... Well, that nearly broke him mentally, didn't it? Because it was all on his shoulders.
It was all on his shoulders, but that's because he's a cut above everyone else. He took it upon himself to play all of those roles, where everybody else is just getting stoned on the tour bus.
That's true.
And if it wasn't for him, I don't think that tour would have happened.
He's a leader, yes.
And then in 1957, he goes to Paris.
Yeah.
Because Nicole Barkley, who set up Barkley Records, wants him as the musical director, arranger, every other hat you can wear on a record label. She's so impressed with him that she employs him.
Yeah.
But she's a rich woman. They go down to the south of France. He doesn't get to work straight away. They go down for a holiday and he's hanging out with everyone from
Picasso.
That's
really cool.
Aristotle Onassis, Maria Callas.
Yeah.
So from all the gigging with all the amazing jazz musicians that we've all heard of in New York.
But that's quite hard.
Now he's over in Paris, paid work on a record label.
Yeah, living the life.
With the jet set.
Yeah.
Living a different type of life. Yeah. I love that he says about Nicole Barkley, her husband, I can't remember his name, Eric or Ernie. Yeah. Quincy Jones has been best man at 5 of his weddings. That's rather a lot.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, he stays in Paris for 5 years. And he actually says as well, it releases him from how he thought of himself, like this black American person. Oh, I'm not just trapped in my community anymore, in my mind. He's like, I'm a person of the world and I'm just a small part of it. And it gave him this really massive confidence when he went back as to who he was. It freed him of his own shackles and therefore he could think outside of the box of himself, and then he just needed to make sure everyone else did. It has to start with you, doesn't it?
Yeah, what is it about Paris? So many of these books we've read, already successful people, go and spend some time in Paris.
World.
And then that's a turning point and they become massive.
Yeah.
That happens to a lot of people.
Freeing for people.
Yeah.
Must be a really good creative cultural scene.
Yeah.
And also its position in Europe may be quite central. Okay. Maybe it's the Birmingham of Europe.
They should sell themselves on that Parisian tourist board. It's the Birmingham of Europe.
That would sell it to me, because I love Brom. But,
Well, it's the Paris of Europe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. 1964, Frank phones. Frank Sinatra phones him. And he hasn't spoken to him for 3 years when they did that one-off concert he arranged for him. And he blew him away. And he says, Q, because he's the first man who called him Q. He goes, can you come and arrange an album for me? I'm doing it with Count Basie. And he goes, yeah, absolutely. When do you want me? Flies to LA. And he says he didn't have anywhere to stay, so Frank Sinatra put him up in Dean Martin's cottage.
Didn't Liberace have a house called that?
And he says, like 6:30 the next morning, there's a knock at the door, and he opens it, and Frank comes in and goes, Q, how do you like your eggs? Do you like my Frank Sinatra? I don't know how he talks.
I know, but why are you doing a voice for Frank Sinatra when you haven't done a voice for anyone else?
Because that's the way he talks.
But it's not the way he talks.
But the way he writes these really cool phrases, I just think they all sound so cool.
Okay.
I can imagine him saying them. I've only been reading it in my head up till now.
Okay.
I've not tried this out loud before. Anyway, Q, how do you like your eggs? He says, from that moment on, we were friends. Like brothers, part of his family, treated him like a brother.
Why? Because he asked him how he likes his eggs.
Well, I brought eggs round to make Q breakfast.
Oh, okay.
Frank Sinatra came round in the morning.
I missed out the point where he came round with eggs. I thought he.
How did you miss that? I said it 3 times in 3 different voices.
You were just saying, how did you like your eggs? I just assumed that he had a cook in a house that was going to make them for him. You did not say that he brought eggs round himself. Obviously, I should have remembered because I read this book.
Yeah.
But,
okay, when he said, how do you like his eggs, it's because he brought eggs round and he made him breakfast.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I bet they felt like brothers after that. They felt like brothers.
And he was like one of the family in their Thanksgivings, everything together. But they really were. They totally connected and went out in the town together and drunk together and everything together. They respected each other so much. They loved each other's work. Of course, we already know that Quincy absolutely loved Count Basie, so it's a match made in heaven. That record I had, by the way, I used to have a whole proper LP of that.
Did you?
Yeah, and there's a picture of Frank's face, it said Frank. Count Basie, it said Splank, because that was his nickname, Frank and Splank. Anyway, that goes so well, this recording, and it is absolutely fantastic, that album, that Frank's so pleased he takes a whole Count Basie orchestra to Vegas and puts them on as a show.
Amazing.
But I take it that's a really long-running show, because around that time, Quincy gets a lot of work scoring for TV and films in LA, and every night he's having to take a flight to Vegas to conduct and MD that show in Vegas. And flying back to work all day on the scores, like he's doing Ironside, which was a
TV cop show. Massive.
Yeah, I did listen to some of the music. It's so cool.
Well, TV scoring. I mean, he took it to another level. Yeah. Because up until then, I mean, people were saying to him, "You need to be careful. You're spending too much time doing it." Because he would literally do every single thing, whereas the previous people who were scoring TV shows would get to a certain point and just write something like sax solo for or something like. But Quincy wouldn't do that. He would like literally
score
arrange and compose and score everything. People were saying, "No, you're literally doing a film a week. You can't sustain it." But he did.
And he said, they said it'll kill you, and he said it literally did. It did. When he left that job, the next person who took over and tried to carry on his work died. They came home from one episode and died. So he literally was pushing himself that far. It's 44 minutes of film standard scoring, composition and arranging a week, and flying to Vegas every night. It's nuts.
I mean, he does say how incredibly difficult it was.
Yeah,
it's not like it was. I
know, it's killing the man.
He was doing it.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he meets this beautiful woman.
This is Ulla, right? So she's a Swedish model, the most beautiful woman he's ever seen.
Yeah.
And he's seen a lot of beautiful women.
Yeah. So they fall instantly in love, if you want to call it that.
Well, they stayed together for a few years.
Actually, they did, yeah. It's just the instantly in love thing I question. But he's working his arse off, as we've just described. So it's not going to work, is it, eventually?
No.
She moved back to Sweden with the kids. And then one of those kids, he writes a chapter, basically his childhood is a repeat of his dad. And he says, he tells people at school, my dad's Quincy Jones, produced all Michael Jackson's albums. And he's like, no, he can't be, because if in that case, why are you living in squalor? Quincy's sending money to his mum and it's not getting through.
And he's at a boarding school, isn't he?
He does spend 1 year at boarding school, which he said it's what he needed. Before that, he's in with gangs. And he says it's just as bad with gangs and stuff in Sweden. You don't imagine it, but it is.
It blows my mind how these men just constantly have children where they, they must have good intentions at one point and think, oh yeah, I'll start a family. But I think they just think that the woman's going to take care of it all.
Well, I'm sure they do. But why do these women do it? The women can surely see that the bloke isn't going to be at home. They never have been. That's not who they are.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. Why would they then complain when the bloke's never at home? That's never been who that person is. Well, I don't know, but it does take two, and I don't see how either party think that the man's going to be there. But anyway, then Peggy Lipton happens, and
do you know Peggy? I was amazed. I had no idea. She's beautiful. She's in Twin Peaks, right?
Another beauty, yeah.
Well, I just remember watching Twin Peaks 25 years ago thinking, wow, who is that woman? She's so beautiful. And then she crops up married to Quincy Jones. He has yet another amazingly attractive woman.
Yeah.
Because he's amazingly attractive himself.
Yeah, I mean, they have pretty kids.
But I have to say, out of all of the wives, the lady partners, I think the best relationship seems to be with Peggy Lipton. And I think it's probably because they got together when they were older, really.
Maybe, but a bit like Rod, all these women seem to still be friends with him. The first wife, Jerry from school, has a whole chapter where she's just doing nothing but saying lovely things about him. One of the people who contribute say, I've never known anyone like it. He's so tactile, he hugs everybody. I don't know another man who would have all his ex-wives around a table for dinner and everyone still loves him. And every time he breaks up with these people, it's breaking his heart. Yes, he's had a million girlfriends and affairs and blah, blah, blah. But he wants to be a good dad. He doesn't want to let his kids have the childhood he had. But he doesn't know how to not be the person he is.
Yeah, I know. So stop having children after you've had 5. How many does he have?
I'm not going to argue with that at all. But yeah, the ones with Peggy Lipton, brilliant names, Khadija and Rashida, lovely. And Khadija ended up going out with Tupac. She was with Tupac when he got shot.
Well, luckily, he said to her, I'm going to a party, but there's a lot of hassle with the Crips at the moment, so I prefer it if you stayed at the hotel and waited for me to come back.
She was with him.
Yeah, and so she stayed in the
together,
hotel. Yeah, and then she was at the hotel, somebody rang her and said Tupac's been shot, and she's like, okay, where in the leg or whatever.
Yeah.
No, he's been shot, he's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that she went out with Tupac. I know so little about Quincy Jones.
No.
So she gets a chapter in this book. Honestly, it's a very good, listeners. It's a very good book. Track it down.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's not just Quincy Jones's voice. There's chapters by everyone in this book. Everyone we've mentioned seems to have their own little chapter in this book. It's
good because you get another perspective.
Yeah.
And you know that he's not lying then because they've said the same thing.
Yeah. And also that kind of goes to show, actually, about how loved Quincy is. There's like literally 25 other people in his life who've all written a chapter in his autobiography. Yeah,
including an ex-wife and the kids who say he's a totally absent father. We absolutely love him to bits. And he isn't totally absent. And that, is it Khadija or Rashida? One of them lived with him for years. It might be neither of them. It's one of his daughters. Lived with him for years. The one who had a wild Swedish life, Snoopy, otherwise known as QD3, really reconnected with him at a certain age, and they're now like really good pals, and he brought hip-hop into Quincy's life. Actually, they seem to, quite a few of them, be really into hip-hop. They were with Notorious B.I.G. when he got killed. Some of them, they were saying, Dad, come to this party, and then Dad, don't come, there's been a shooting. Notorious B.I.G. has got killed. They really are kind of in with all that scene, his kids.
So where are we now?
I was going to say there's a point where he got really political because he was trailing behind Martin Luther King's coffin with Marlon Brando. Everyone hangs out with Marlon Brando.
He turns up a lot.
He's hanging out at Birdland with Marlon Brando and Sidney Poitier. And Marlon Brando at the time was in A Streetcar Named Desire on Broadway, and we just go and hang out and listen to jazz afterwards. And Sidney Poitier was trying to get rid of his Bahamian accent. So he was hanging out down there. What a scene.
Yeah.
How cool is that? Anyway, he was getting really into politics, and he went and to Chicago and hung out with Jesse Jackson. Mm-hmm. So there's where little Michelle Obama. That's what I was thinking. How funny that Michelle Obama would have been there. Mm-hmm. So these little ghosts crossing in the night. They didn't know each other. Like, Michelle Obama didn't exist. The big one.
But her friend was Jesse Jackson's daughter. Yeah.
So they might have. They really would have crossed paths. Yeah. So he joined his army. It says Jesse Jackson. He really got involved in Chicago business, and then his brain exploded.
Damn it.
And the crazy thing about that is he had a 1 in 100 chance of survival in 2 operations. And between the first one and the second one, he went to his own memorial because they'd arranged it for him. And it was Sarah Vaughan, Ray Charles, Minnie Riperton, Cuba Gooding Sr., Sidney Poitier, Richard Pryor. Like, he's just said anyone that he cares about was playing at his memorial. They'd arranged it in case he died, but then they decided to go ahead anyway, and so he attended it. Isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
But also how brilliant. And then he went into his second operation and he was fine. And he's still alive. One of the amazing things Quincy did is not just be utterly brilliant. He's actually a pioneer in so many ways, not just music, because all the things he ended up getting into by being trained by this woman in Paris that really was training people like Stravinsky. He says that black musicians were never allowed anywhere near strings because strings and orchestras of classical music was white people's territory and black people had jazz. And you never let black people over to an orchestra with strings. Mm-hmm. And he was absolutely determined to learn strings. And that's why he went to Paris. Then he was like, I want to score films. And the first job he got in the film industry, when he walked in, they went, hang on, we just got to go and have a meeting. And he knew it's because they didn't know he's black. And apparently that bloke had gone out and phoned Henry Mancini and said, do you know this bloke, Quincy? Can he do white music? And he said, you fucking kidding me? Of course he can. He's a genius. He studied with this woman in Paris, blah, blah, blah. Yes, he can. And he said Henry Mancini was a friend forever. He really broke I think there's one other black bloke scoring films at that time.
I know.
Broke boundaries.
Truman Capote, when Truman Capote did In Cold Blood, he was dead set on getting Leonard Bernstein to do it. The producer said, no, I want Quincy Jones. And Truman Capote was so against it. But Quincy got the job because the producer stuck by him. And then after the screening, Truman Capote came up crying. To Quincy Jones. Saying sorry.
Yeah. And he's one of those people where his kids have chapters in this book saying how absent their dad was, or if he was there, he was often there, but they lived in a house full of paper, like stacks of paper everywhere, because he's scoring, just writing music and reading, and he just can't stop working. But what he's really doing is he's another one of those pioneers. He's doing it so everyone else can. He absolutely pushed things forward so much. Even to the point when he's making the record with Michael, that's still seen as black music. Which is impossible.
MTV wouldn't play the videos
for people
in the beginning.
Like me, because he was just a massive pop icon when I was a kid. So I can't imagine a time when that wasn't mainstream and when you'd consider that a black artist. He's just the best.
Well, I think it was probably that album had a lot to do with making it mainstream.
It did. That's the point.
That was a turning point.
Yes, it is. It said that Off the Wall was the biggest selling black album of all time.
Biggest selling black album.
That's what I'm saying. Now it's just...
And then Thriller became the biggest selling album of all time.
Yes, in our minds, because we came in at this point, not from the 30s or 40s, it's just the biggest selling album. You know, you don't see it that way because it was that big.
Yeah.
The other thing is The Colour Purple, where Steven Spielberg wants to direct it, and he gets Quincy Jones on board because they're really good pals. It's really funny, isn't it? Steven Spielberg's sister used to be Quincy Jones's assistant.
To the point where his sister was saying, oh, will you check out this VHS of the thing my little brother did? Yeah. And that little brother is Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, she's going around the office trying to get everyone to watch my little brother's little film. As he was no one. Oh, God, they have that meeting with Tina Turner.
This blows my mind.
Yeah, same here. He thinks it's a Colour Purple meeting because it's Steven Spielberg, Quincy and Tina Turner.
And Tina Turner says...
she says, I've spent 20 years trying to get out of this shit. I ain't going back there. Wow. And Quincy Jones is like, can't comprehend he's hearing this from Tina Turner. But then he goes, understood it afterwards because he realises he'd watched her life story, What's Love Got to Do with It, and realised what she actually had come from, what she had fought to come up out of.
Yeah.
And that she actually said, I actually only came to this meeting because I wanted to talk to Steven Spielberg because I want to play Indiana Jones.
Yes. But
amazing.
No, I thought that Steven Spielberg was considering her for Indiana Jones.
She wanted to play Harrison Ford's part.
Yeah, because I had read it twice.
Yeah, me too.
Because I kind of thought, she wants to be in it.
No, she wants to be
Indiana Jones.
Yes.
What a film that would have been.
He's actual genius. Why the hell not?
Yeah, she'd have been incredible. Yeah. I mean, I love Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones, but Tina Turner would have been better.
Yeah, it's great. It's such a brilliant concept.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, that bit. And then, anyway, he says, unfortunately, it seemed to be the vibe for the whole film because no one would touch it, no one would fund it. And everyone was saying, but Steven Spielberg's supposed to be doing Schindler's List, even then.
Right.
Because, give the Jewish white man a Holocaust film. He shouldn't be doing The Colour Purple. Everyone's got to be bracketed in their things. Mm-hmm. And then the writer, Alice Walker, says, I recommend this actress I know who's been on welfare, lives in San Francisco, called Whoopi Goldberg, puts her forward. And then they cannot cast the last person. And then Quincy's in some hotel room early in the morning, and it's a local channel with a local presenter on it. And he goes, there she is.
Yeah.
That's her, Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
So she was on telly, but she was no one.
No one, yeah.
And she got that part from Quincy Jones happening to watch telly. Association with Michael Jackson started with The Wiz.
With The Wiz.
The director, Sidney Lumet, he'd already done 5 films, scored 5 or 6 films for him. And he asked him to do The Wiz, and he didn't want to do it at all.
No, he said he was really uninspired by it. Didn't like the songs much. No. Although I think he liked Ease On Down the Road.
Who doesn't like that song? So he got the job of MD, and he went through it all and was like, why hasn't Michael Jackson got a song? Michael Jackson is from the Jacksons, Jackson 5. He needs to have a song, so he made them write him a song when he's the Scarecrow. Michael Jackson's the Scarecrow. Richard Pryor is the Wizard. Diana Ross is Dorothy. And the Wizard's Tower is the World Trade Center. It's an amazing cast. It's great music. And it's a really great take on the whole story. It's great.
But he was really impressed with Michael Jackson and his work ethic. He said he was in at like 5 o'clock every morning getting the Scarecrow made up. And he wasn't complaining or anything.
Nope.
It was just work, and he was really dedicated.
And he knew his own lines and everyone else's.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was really impressed. And Michael had said, I'm going to do a solo album. I'm looking for a producer. And he thought, nah. And all right, I'll help you find one. And then every day he became more and more impressed with him.
Mm-hmm.
He just got won over. And there and then he went, I'm going to produce your album.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah. And that album was off the wall.
Off the charts, mate.
But at the same time, Quincy's also doing his own music.
He's doing tons of other stuff.
Yeah, really good stuff.
Yeah, that's the only reason he was hesitant. He was just booked up to the eyeballs.
Shout out to Ashford and Simpson,
Yes.
who also turn up in this book.
Yes.
Legends.
When did he get to work with them? Was it on The Wiz? Did they come up on The Wiz?
Around that time. But what I also thought, because obviously Quincy's doing a lot of albums under his own name, but actually people like Al Jarreau, Minnie Riperton, they're all getting their first releases under the name Quincy Jones. And then obviously from that they go on and get Patty Austin, I think.
Because he had Quincy Jones Productions, didn't he?
Yeah. So a lot of people are coming up through his music.
It was like 4 singing. When Lloyd said he went to visit Quincy, and this 4-year-old Patty Austin was singing in his flat.
I had no idea that she was like a little...
That had been around for that long. I had no idea either.
Yeah. And she sings either on Razzmatazz or I Know Corrida. I can never remember which one it is.
There's a lot. And Shaka Khan's also. I mean, everybody. George Benson will give it like bing, bing. Oh, so he doesn't get too much into the Michael Jackson albums, does he?
I have to say,
enough.
I'm very disappointed with the lack of detail around Thriller.
Yeah,
it's wrapped up in a chapter. I want to know more.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, it's the biggest selling album of all time. He could have written more about it.
He could have. Michael was still alive when he wrote this book, because he says, I love Michael. No matter what anyone says about him, my arms are always open to him, my heart's always open to him. He's very much alive when he's writing.
So why didn't he write a chapter about Quincy
good
Jones?
point.
The one thing that surprised me about the recording of Thriller, because obviously Quincy Jones and Steven Spielberg are real pals, Quincy Jones agreed to do an E.T. album for Spielberg with Michael Jackson. Whilst they're recording Thriller, whilst they're under a tight deadline to deliver Thriller, they decide to do this E.T. side project.
It gave them 2 months to do Thriller. By the time they finished that, they had 2 months to put Thriller together.
That's crazy. And so that's actually amazing that Thriller turned out to be the biggest selling album
It really
of all
is.
time.
But I know loads of stories about all of that. But I was hoping to get a bit more
in this book
from Quincy. There aren't a lot of spoilers.
The thing that I thought was really interesting, is a bit of a nerdy thing, was that when they eventually, when their time was up, they said that the lead single was number 2 in the charts, and the record label were like, where is this album? We need to release it yesterday. They had a hearing session.
Oh, yes.
And it just didn't sound great.
No,
and it was
they all
because,
went off crying.
Yeah, there was too much music on the album, so the grooves were too tightly packed. Yeah. So how they did, they actually went and they cut like a verse out of Human Nature, and they cut the intro to Billie Jean, which was initially much longer.
Really long,
So they cut it all down to make it shorter so that it would fit on the vinyl better, the sound would be better, and that was all done at the last minute.
It's amazing, isn't it, that from something that they go away crying to the best album you've ever heard in your life. It's nuts, isn't it?
Right, can we just also talk about something else that happened at this moment in time? We Are the World.
We Are the World.
Bloody amazing song.
Yeah, he got 46 legends together.
Yeah, legends.
Not just a few scatteringly good people. Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie wrote We Are the World.
And I learned, thanks to this book, that they both wanted to sing the whole song on their own and have 45 other amazing legends just being their backup choir. And Quincy was like, that's not going to happen. No way that's going to happen.
No. Oh, and also it was Harry Belafonte's idea.
There he is again, Harry Belafonte. He keeps popping up. And then they said the bit at the end with like Bruce Springsteen, that just came to them in the moment. So they kind of, Quincy Jones had already directed, Donna Summer, State of Independence.
Yes.
Has an all-star choir.
Yes, I didn't know that was all-star. Yeah, I learned that in this book.
So Quincy Jones had already that experience of producing all of those singers on one track.
Yes.
So he knew that when he came to have that many people in that room for a short amount of time, they had to know exactly what they were doing. So they already knew who was coming. They already knew which voices would sound good together. Yep. And they said they're not going to leave it up to anybody in that room. So I want to sing this, I want to sing that.
X's on the floor for where people stand, so there's no question.
Quincy put a sign on the door saying, leave all of your egos outside.
Yeah.
And then when they came in, they were told what to do, which is amazing because when they do actually have that big choir at the end, there are people in it. You think, my God, they never got a line. That is the amount of talent in that room.
Who are some of the top people we're talking about now?
Dionne Warwick, Willie Nelson, Bruce Springsteen, Stevie Wonder, Cyndi Lauper, Michael Jackson, Paul Simon, Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
amazing.
Incredible,
And so many more, bloody hell, so many more. Everyone's in it.
But in that choir at the end, there's people like Bette Midler and stuff, and you think, gosh, she never even got a line in the song.
I hadn't even noticed that.
Yeah, they're real legends.
I'll have to watch that again.
But that bit at the end, Quincy just got the idea that he would get Bruce Springsteen to do a call and response with it, and then he had the idea because Stevie
Wonder. Where it is, we are the world.
Yeah.
We are the children.
Just like that, yeah. And
I was reading it thinking, is that what it is? And I just didn't get around to looking it up.
And then when they were mixing it, they called Stevie Wonder back and actually thought it might be better if it's just one voice. So then it keeps going back from Bruce Springsteen to Stevie Wonder. And you kind of think, oh, why did these two people never make an album together? It would have been amazing.
Didn't they say they spliced every other one with the full choir sound and then every other one with just the singular voice? Yeah, anyway, basically, he's a mixing genius. He's got the ear for it. That's put together by Quincy Jones. It's written by other people, but that's what his genius. He's the choir master, the orchestrator, really is, the arranger, the producer, the musical director, the stage manager, and the man in charge. He's an amazing human being, isn't he?
100%, yeah. It blows my mind what that man is capable of, what he achieved, still achieving, still winning Grammys, in all genres of music these days, not just jazz. And to think that was a little boy once eating rats. And...
Yeah, it's nuts, isn't it? This is what he says. He describes what it's like to be the arranger and musical director when he first works for Frank Sinatra. And he says the MD has to love the soul of the singer, which I found really interesting. And he says you've got to really get to know them and where their range is, how their style is, so that you leave them enough space. Or you also can't put too many notes that are in their range, so they've got the space. So, I was like, wow, I never got into the ins and outs of what it takes to actually do that job when you're working around a voice. It's like he absolutely knows it's more than just even the music, to know the soul and love the soul of the person you're working with. There's so many elements. And he knows them all. He is a Stravinsky or in his genre. Yeah, into the 90s, he scored the soundtracks to Boys in the Hood, Malcolm X. It's really worth listening to some of his soundtrack music. It's fantastic.
I had no idea the extent of how many films he was involved in.
That's the stuff I didn't know. You know that, I think it's Ironside. It's the bit from Kill Bill. It goes... it's Kill Bill. That's Quincy Jones. That's his Ironside music. They sampled it.
Yeah, I was going to say his legacy, like at the end of this book, he just kind of talks about how his music is just everywhere
heavily
now
sampled
because of samples and stuff. And
so it's gone into hip hop. Of course, it has.
The bossa nova thing was taken as the theme music for Austin Powers.
Of course, it was.
So that one thing in itself is probably worth $10 million.
Yeah, but I think it was soul. Was it? No, hang on. It was De La Soul first. My definition.
My definition of a boombastic
is my definition.
Yeah.
Is that De La Soul?
No, my definition is Dream Warriors.
Dream Warriors, yeah.
Yeah. It's
so
everywhere.
Cool. He worked his arse off. It's unbelievably influential. If anybody hasn't heard of Quincy Jones, well, hopefully they have.
Well, no, it's kind of like I said at the beginning, until I read this book, I was clueless. I knew he was a record producer that had done Thriller, and I knew he had a couple of his own hits in the 1980s. I think that's what most people know of him. I think Quincy Jones is probably the least recognisable name of anyone we've done so far.
I think you might be right, but the point is, now we've done this, hopefully everyone will have a little idea.
Yeah. He will, just through his work, quite literally. I mean, he's old now. He's not going to be going on for much longer. But it's kind of like...
But he will never die.
He will never die.
He won't.
Because his music is just going to live on. That's his legacy.
Jazz into pop, film scores into hip-hop. It's a really important journey of music that he is a major contributor of and pioneer of.
And which involves almost every single major black artist since the 1930s.
Yeah.
And some pretty big white ones too.
Yep, and we're talking 9 decades. So if anyone's interested in any of this...
read the book.
Read the book.
Read the
brilliant.
book.
Masterpiece.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Thrift Shop Biography. We love making this podcast and we're absolutely thrilled that so many of you are already listening. We're new to this and you could really help us out by leaving us a review somewhere, wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you could share us, tell your friends about us or drop some links on social media. We have a Facebook page called Thrift Shop Biography, so make sure you come over there to hear about the episodes first and what else we're up to. Okay, see you next week. And if you're new here, there are loads more episodes now to go and listen in the back catalogue, so make sure you go and enjoy them. Okay, thank you very much.